The Final Furlong Podcast is proudly brought to you by Jeff Banks Bet. Join the excitement and sign up to Jeff Banks online now to get 10% off any net losses returned as cash after your first month of betting up to £500 at jeffbanks.bet. Welcome to the Final Furlong Podcast. I'm Emmet Kennedy. It is great to have your company and great to have the company of a familiar voice and face on the show. Welcome back, Abbie MacGregor, industry expert, with some hot takes on the latest in the racing world. Great to have you back, Abbie.
Thank you for having me back.
So I wanted to talk to you about Labour and what a Labour government is going to mean for British racing. And I, for one, would like to welcome our new overlords, and Keir Starmer, and particularly Lady Starmer, to the sport. I'm not entirely certain that Lady Starmer's presence at a race meeting the day after their sweeping victory necessarily means that all is now rosy in the garden of British racing, but it's certainly a nice indication. But then the solar farm news came out for Newmarket, which is going to have a devastating impact on Newmarket, which of course is the headquarters of Flat Racing's HQ. So let's talk about that first of all, but your overall perception of Labour and what their leadership of Britain will mean for British horse racing.
Well, we had the King's speech on Wednesday. There was no explicit mention of horse racing or gambling, which is obviously disappointing. But there's a lot in it about growth, which I think is quite positive, considering that essentially a racetrack is like a small economic powerhouse. So they do want to grow the country. They want to expand, not just in the kind of metropolitan hub of London, but they want to expand in the north, which is great because so many racetracks are indeed in the north. But the horse racing industry really has to capitalise on that. And we'll come to that a little bit later, but more in terms of what their policies will mean for horse racing specifically. My biggest concern is that in British politics, the left has never had a monopoly on their vote. So they've always had fringe groups or smaller patches of opposition like the Lib Dems and the Greens, and then you've got some independent candidates mixed in there. Whereas with the Tories, they've usually had the right to themselves. So when Labour get in power, they have to appease these other groups. The Lib Dems have got 70 seats. The Greens got more seats than they ever did in Parliament. So they'll be wanting to make sure that come the next election, those voters go over to them rather than staying with the Lib Dems and the Greens and the Independents. So there'll be a lot of appeasing going on. And that's how I think we've landed on the solar farm in Newmarket, because Ed Miliband, who is the Energy Secretary, is really pushing on green, net zero, eco-friendly policies. And this is part of the problem that we have in horse racing, which I've said for some time, which is that the leadership only really seem to recognise threats when they're at the door. The best time to fix the roof is when the sun is shining, because when it's raining, you somehow got to stop the rain and fix the roof. You've got double a task. And there's an excellent saying in politics that you can't fatten a pig on market day. You can't expect to do things in one day and then get the results. You have to build the story. You have to build the narrative. We had that with Animal Rising. It almost came as if it was if it was shocking, it was out of the blue. You've had that kind of animal rights extremism going on in the fringes for a very, very long time. And so it's no surprise that they were going to come for horse racing in a big way eventually. It's the same with the solar wind farm. Racehorse tracks take up a huge amount of land. They also use a huge amount of water. That will be the next thing on the kind of eco agenda, is how much water they use. Golf courses will be exactly the same. Indeed, during the pandemic, there was a restriction on the amount of water you could use in a golf course, and it rendered most of them unusable. So we have to be a lot more proactive in predicting these issues and then moving according with it. And that's why this idea of growth is so important. So there'll be a lot of new MPs who want to curry favour with the big businesses in their constituencies. There are 60 MPs in the UK with a racecourse in their constituency. And so it's really important that we foster and build relationships with them. We need to make sure that we make clear that horse racing is not only part of the rich tapestry of British history and British sport, but it's also a massive, massive employment opportunity. It generates tourism. It's great for the local economy. And we haven't really been doing enough of that. And that's why I believe the solar wind farm has been allowed to happen, because we haven't made a big enough statement about the importance of horse racing. You can't just show up the day it's proposed and say, oh, what about horse racing? That should already be considered when it's being thought of. Ed Miliband should be sitting there thinking, oh, yeah, but hang on a minute. What about the Newmarket gaps? They're really important for the British economy, the lifeblood of the British economy. The fact that he didn't think that and pushed ahead with this plan anyway shows how horse racing is seen, not just in politics, but just in general. We need to make sure that horse racing is seen in a far, far better light and is seen as much more influential than it currently is.
I agree with all of that. I do want to just move on to this solar farm, which I'm very perplexed by. I don't doubt climate change is real. I'm not a climate change denier, because Earth, we know through scientific research and through history, had an ice age. So yeah, climate change is obviously real. But if you look at how the media has talked about it, in the 1970s, they were forecasting the ice age is coming. That was a Clash lyric. Literally, they stole that from the corporate media. And then the planet started to heat up. So they had to switch the narrative to global warming. Global warming's the thing that's going to destroy the planet. And I believed it all. I watched Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth. And scientists were talking about acid rain was going to destroy. Acid rain would be a thing. It couldn't be stopped because of man-made pollution. And what it was going to do, your fault for spraying your can of deodorant. How dare you spray your Lynx? You're destroying the ozone layer. And this is what Al Gore talked about in An Inconvenient Truth in 2006. He said the polar ice caps were going to melt. He said the ozone layer was going to be completely eradicated and destroyed and gone, and we'd be subjected to the radiation rays of the sun. He talked about the sea levels would rise and flood the earth. All of that he predicted in 2006 to happen by 2020. And
yeah, we're good.
No. And all of the climate grifters, it's a $1.5 trillion industry per year.
Oh, that's all.
Just that, yeah. John Kerry is the climate czar for the Americans. Flies around in a private jet owned by his wife. His wife is one of she's the daughter of the founder of the Heinz Sauce Foundation, so or a company, so she's worth billions. And he lied to Congress about owning a private. I've never personally owned a private jet. Does your wife own a private jet? She just sold it. But that's not the point. I've never personally owned a private jet, you know. But all these people are buying beachfront property. Well, if the earth is flooding, why are you buying beachfront property? That seems like a really weird thing for Barack Obama to do, who's big into climate change. Really weird thing for Bill Gates to do, who's massive into climate change. I don't understand why you would do that. And I don't really understand. By the way, according to don't take my word for it, this is the Greenpeace co-founder, Dr. Patrick Moore. He said that if we achieve net zero, 50% of the world's population will die. So
not good.
There's that. Again, don't take my word for it. Take the word of the co-founder of Greenpeace, Dr. Patrick Moore. Exactly. And if Abbie or anyone watching this dares to drive your vehicle into London, you've got to pay your carbon charges, your congestion charges. How dare you, by the way, drive your vehicle into London? Who do you think you are? The average commercial airliner.
Drive my vehicle into London at the moment, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm not entirely certain anybody really wants to be going to London at the moment. But anyway, I love London. It's an amazing city, but my goodness. But
luckily enough, forget all that, because the Newmarket solar farm is coming to save the earth.
Yeah. But on the congestion charges, one commercial flight from an airliner emits more carbon emissions and pollution than the entire lifespan of the average car. One flight. 1,300 planes land in London every single day. So if we're really concerned about climate change and we really have to change our ways and do all we can to fix the planet, it's not you having the audacity and you disgusting individual for driving your petrol or diesel vehicle. How dare you? You're destroying the environment. It's not you. It's the airlines. or the
That's
military.
Yeah, I mean, even if we achieve net zero, if China continue their behaviour, it will make absolutely no difference whatsoever.
Yeah,
and there's no evidence that it would make any difference anyway. It's all based on. I mean, as we know, when we witness the kind of Animal Rising saga, what's projected in the media now, the narrative doesn't have to be evidence based. It just has to sound good. It's usually based on emotions, and emotions rarely make for good sound policy.
Yeah. If you're emotional about a racehorse and you want to back that horse because emotion outweighs logic of its chance of winning, then fair enough. That's okay.
Yeah, we like.
That's nothing wrong with that. But if you're emotional about the planet and you think that Abbie's a racist for daring to question climate change, why are you a racist? Why are you a misogynist, Abbie? Questioning the science. Because if we've learned anything in the last few years, it's you should never question the science. Why would anybody question the science?
For at all.
Exactly. It was, after all, a scientific fact that the Earth was flat. It was an agreed upon scientific fact, and when people started to question it, go, actually, I think it's a sphere. I think it's round.
Not what it says on Twitter.
You're crazy! The Earth, clearly, the sun revolves around the Earth. That's everyone. Everyone knows that. Oh, wait, no, actually, Galileo went, I don't know. I don't think it does, actually. I think we revolve around the sun.
You conspiracy
racist! It's like... We are constantly questioning science, and the only way that you can evolve is to question science and discover new things. Oppenheimer, Einstein, Heisenberg would never have made the nuclear fusion. I know Einstein wasn't fully involved in that, but he did an awful lot of the theoretical physics works to get them where they were. Well, if they hadn't questioned all of the science to get there, then we wouldn't know this stuff. So you should be questioning this. You absolutely should be questioning it. And if anybody is telling you, don't question the science, don't question climate change,
you should ask why.
Do you have any idea how many nuclear bombs have been detonated around the world, Abbie MacGregor?
I do not know. I do not have the exact figures off the top of my head. Do you know?
Oh, I know.
Go for it.
There's obviously Oppenheimer's test, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But it didn't stop there. They continued to test them. Great Britain, United States of America, China, Soviet Union, obviously, India, Pakistan, North Korea. Over 2,400 nuclear bombs have been detonated around the world from the 1940s right through to the 2010s. Do you think that might have had some kind of a, I don't know, detrimental impact on our environment? Might that have had some sort of a negative impact on the ecosystem? But no, it's your fault for spraying your can of deodorant. How dare you? Recycle.
But then when Mount Etna does like a volcanic burp, it releases more carbon per tons than most of our human activity anyway.
Yep.
But it's all based on that. I mean, again, go back to Animal Rising. That is part of the issue that we face in modern culture, where you can argue something. You can argue what you like, as long as it's in this very narrow spectrum of what is acceptable. And that's the problem that we have in gambling now, because so much of it is based on emotion and tragedy that it stops us from being able to see clearly. And a lot of it is based on anger as well, misplaced anger at the industry. And so it's very difficult for us to argue with people who are dead set against blaming the industry, because they have statistics with them which are plainly false and have been proven false, but they sound so convincing because they're so emotional. So when Gambling with Life says that there's one suicide a day from gambling, that is so obviously false, because that would put death by gambling in the top 3 reasons for suicide in the UK, which is just impossible. Not enough people gamble for that to be achieved. And in 2022, there were no coroner reports in the UK that listed suicide, gambling-related suicide, as a cause of death. But because it appeals to people's emotions, that is a fantastic way of gaining momentum of your cause. And it's very hard to argue against, because you don't want to be the one who goes on the radio and says, are you sure that there's that many people have died from gambling? It makes you sound heartless and cruel. And that's why it's so important that we get our argument right as an industry. We unite as an industry, which we have not done. So as an industry, we have gone into a negotiation with the government empty-handed. We've ignored the fact that the government have said that they have a manifesto pledge to reduce gambling harm. And we've said, no, we just don't want affordability checks. No, no, no. At no stage have any of the big players given an alternative to affordability checks. Blanket measures never work. It didn't work in Scotland with minimum alcohol pricing. In fact, more people died from alcohol-related death once that was imposed than before. Death by alcohol in Scotland is now at a 14-year high. So we need something that is targeted, that is based in clinical science rather than money, and looks at people's behaviours. And you can do that with all the technologies that we have in place now, with AI, and looking at all the data that the bookmakers already have. That's the argument that we should be making, but no one is prepared to make it. And that's how we've ended up in the situation with the solar wind farm, where horse racing has once again been seen as collateral damage. And it's exactly what you said with the climate argument. You talk about the Al Gore movie going back to 2006. You look at how deodorant was discussed in the 1980s. I think there was a PCB scandal that was also in the 1980s. And this has been going on for a very, very long time. So it wasn't just that Extinction Rebellion suddenly started throwing paint on the M25 and people thought, oh, climate change, let's all start talking about that. No, it was a sustained effort over decades and decades. And it was built upon and built upon and built upon. And it's now been made to sound so much worse than it actually is, because it's all about that kind of pull of public pressure. It was once a climate crisis. Now it's a climate emergency, because the story is told again and again and again. With horse racing, we expect to say, oh, well, affordability checks are here. Well, horse racing is so important. You can't do this. You can't do this. Yes, but where were you before? Where was the industry before saying that? You have to fatten the pig before you get to market. And so what you want horse racing to be seen as, horse racing tracks to be seen as, is sort of like the equivalent of libraries. So I don't know anyone who uses a library anymore, because the reality is now books are so cheap. You can get them online. You can get a book for like a $5 on Amazon, and you can get it delivered tomorrow. And we are more prosperous as a country than we were when libraries were first invented. I think I've gone to my local library a couple of times with my children. Most of the time, there's nobody else in there. But if you say, we're shutting down the local library, no, you can't do shutting down the local library. What are you in bed with the devil or something? You can't do that. It's a library. It's a public necessity. What will the children do? The children will become illiterate. They won't be able to read. What is this madness?
Won't someone think of the children?
Exactly. No one uses it, but it's seen as a precious local commodity. It's seen as a premium. And that's what horse racing tracks should be seen as. You can't risk a horse racing track because you risk a hit to the economy. You risk the tourism, the hospitality, the breeding industry, the knock-on effect it would have on jobs, the knock-on effect it would have for the sporting reputation of Britain. That's what should be said about horse racing, but it's not, because we confront arguments and challenges to horse racing when they're at our doorstep, rather than when they're all the way back there kind of garnering energy. We talked about the ratchet effect before. It goes in stages, slowly but surely. You want to catch it when it's on the first ratchet, not when it's on the 15th ratchet. We should be preparing now for what we're going to say when there are protesters on the tracks talking about how much water a racetrack uses. There'll be a banner, 15,000 litres of water just to make this track green. That's what it will be. We should be preparing for that, but we don't. No,
we don't. And also, discourse, and I blame the media for this, has just descended into absolute madness. My mother's not well. She was watching, I don't know, BBC4, I think it was, and they were replaying an episode of Parkinson. I've said this before on the show. It was an old episode of Parkinson, and I was doing some work on the laptop. I remember thinking, like, what is she putting this on for? But watched it, wasn't really paying much attention to it, was on my laptop doing some work, and I became engrossed in the conversation. It was George Best was the first guest, and the George Best on Parkinson is not the George Best that you heard about afterwards in the tabloids. And it's awful. He's an alcoholic. He's a womanizer. He's a terrible person. This was an intelligent, thoughtful individual, but he wanted fair pay for all footballers. And for that, he had to be destroyed, because that's not right. The executives have to be the ones who get the money, not the idiot players. They're not the real stars. The people who own the clubs, they're the ones who are the heroes. So he had to be destroyed. After him was Kenneth Williams, Maggie Smith, and the Poet Laureate. I don't think I've ever seen the Poet Laureate appear on the Graham Norton show, and I love Graham Norton. I think he's fantastic. It's great. It's the best of the chat shows now. But this was a real highbrow conversation. It was funny. It was witty. They were sarcastic, but they were thoughtful, and they were talking about society and architecture and why is it buildings are so... They were literally in the 1970s talking about, why are buildings so boring now? Like, why are they so dull and drab? Why is it people are being put in these apartment blocks and skyrises where they're being kept away from their children playing down the ground? Why is there no hope in any of these buildings? There's no aspiration from them. We used to build beautiful architecture, beautiful, inspiring buildings. We don't do that anymore. It's all this boring, destructive stuff. This was a conversation on the BBC on the Parkinson show in the 1970s. And that doesn't happen anymore. There's no conversations like that. There's no conversations where there's nuance between right and left. Nobody who's a Labour supporter or a Conservative supporter, or even worse, the Conservatives in the United States against the Democrats in the US. Nobody presents their arguments and goes, right, here's our view from the left. Here's what we think here's what we think is wrong with America now, and how we think America should go forward. And if you vote for us, these are the policies we'll put forward. You might not like leftist politics, but come with us and we'll take you on a journey, and we think we can make America better. And then the right counter, and they can criticize and say, well, here's why that stuff is lunacy, and here's why we think we'll do better, and here's our policies. And there's probably a little bit of slagging going on between both sides, but in the end, it's civil discourse, and the viewer, the public, the voter will choose which voice they want to go with. And sometimes it's the charismatic snake oil salesman who lies to you, because they're politicians. They all bloody lie. They're all corrupt. They're all in it for themselves. They're paranoid, and they act in their own self-interest. But at least the discourse was, this is democracy. Democracy is on the ballot. It's your vote. You get the right to choose. Whether you're right or left, you get the right to choose. And now it's both sides hate one another, to the point that they're calling each other racists and bigots and misogynists and xenophobes. You can't be a right-winger in America and hold a job of high prestige and say that, oh, you're going to vote for Donald Trump. You'll be ostracized. You're not allowed to do that. How dare you? How dare you actually express the political opinion that you're on the right? And meanwhile, if someone on the left is to advocate for, I don't know, abortion, right-wingers will say, how dare you? It's murder! I don't think anybody has the right to tell a woman what she can or cannot do with her own body. But that being said, there are limits to that too. But you're not allowed to express an opinion if you're in the tribe. If you're on the left tribe, your tribe is right. Joe Biden's a man, a paragon of virtue, a decent man. He brought decency back to the White House. No, cocaine was found in the White House. Not while Trump was there, while Joe Biden was there. We all know whose it was. He plagiarized a Bobby Kennedy speech in the 1980s when he was running first for president in his 1988 campaign. Lied about it. Then plagiarized the Neil Kinnock speech, almost word for word, and lied about that too. Told everybody that he'd graduated top of his class in college with honors and won a prestigious academic award. All lies. Said he was a high school football star. Complete lies. The man is a delusional fantasist and a narcissist. And those lies you can say, well, it's small things. He stole a speech from some people he looks up to. What does that matter? It matters about who the person's character is. You're presenting yourself as this paragon of virtue, as a decent person. You're saying that you're the person who can lead, but you don't have any original ideas. You steal your ideas from other people. It means you're not authentic. He literally implemented raising the retirement age in the United States and then bragged about it when he got it done. I don't think that's something to celebrate. Making sure that there's minimum mandatory sentences for people caught in possession of crack cocaine. Not with intent to supply, just using it. And it tends to be the poorest people who use crack cocaine. But when his son gets caught in possession of it, oh, nothing done to Hunter for that. Oh, you can't. Oh, well, Hunter's had a hard life. On the board of Burisma, Ukrainian energy board, being paid $80,000 a month, despite the fact he doesn't speak Russian, doesn't speak Ukrainian, has no experience in the energy sector or anything to do with Ukraine whatsoever. Why would he be on that board? Oh, of course, the Hunter Biden laptop reveals all of this. Lies. You're lied to over and over and over again. It's endless propaganda. And that's not to say that Donald Trump is some decent, misunderstood guy. No, he's a narcissist. He's a New York real estate tycoon. He's unbelievably corrupt. He's clearly a sexist. He's clearly a misogynist. Don't put these people on pedestals. They are not good people. They're not heroes. They don't have your best interest at heart. They're all liars. They're all corrupt. They're all out for themselves. And people are losing their minds on Twitter about, oh my goodness, if you're not on Team Biden, America's going to fall apart. You can't be a dictator in America. The Founding Fathers literally built the framework for American politics to prevent any dictator because they fought off a dictator. You might want to hear it in Britain, but they fought a dictator, beat him, got their independence, and made sure that the framework for American politics could never have that happen again. So Donald Trump can't be a dictator. No more than Kamala Harris, who's probably going to take over, can be a dictator. None of them can be. But you're lied to by a media that's out for itself. It needs your clicks. It needs your views. It needs you to hate other people. It needs you to think a certain way. Don't look over here. Look here. Don't pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. This is the Wizard of Oz. It's all a sham. The whole thing is. And nobody's able to have a nuanced, intelligent conversation anymore. You're not allowed to present facts. You're not allowed to present what's really going on. Because if you do, you're a racist or a bigot. So this solar farm, this is going to last for 25 to 30 years. That's the lifespan of it. They've already said that at the end of it, it will then be repurposed back to what it was before. So you're going to take perfectly good agricultural working land that's used to produce food, grain, wheat. You're going to destroy that for solar panels that can be taken out in a hailstorm, which has happened several times in America and the Middle East and around the world.
It's happened in Wales. There was a wind turbine that fell down during high wind.
Yes, it had its blades snapped clean off. By the way, wind turbines are a complete con job. They require an epic amount of diesel to start and an epic amount of oil to maintain, and they only last for 25 years. Solar panels, on the other hand, are worse because you can't recycle them. And they degrade by 1% each year. So they're gone in 25 years, even if you were to maintain them to a really high standard. And then what are you supposed to do with them? You can't recycle, so they fall into a landfill? I thought that's the whole point of this, was that we're trying to make the environment better and safer. But no. And why are they being put in Newmarket or in Suffolk? Why are you putting them on the Cambridgeshire-Suffolk border, where they say it's going to power 172,000 homes? I'd be fairly suspect about that figure, personally. And we'll create 1,500 jobs during construction. That's great. There's 8,500 people working in Newmarket.
Indeed.
It's worth hundreds of millions of pounds to the British economy. Why are you endangering farmland and racing land, livestock areas? Why are you endangering that land for solar panels?
It's like you said, it's the media discourse in which we live, where facts are presented as opinions. So, and then opinions are presented as facts. So with the animal welfare issue, well, if you get rid of horse racing, you eradicate the breed. That's not my opinion. That's a fact.
Hundreds of years of selective breeding to get where we are, all done away with. This episode of the Final Furlong Podcast is only possible with your support, listening and watching, and with the support of our sponsors. So give me 60 seconds to tell you about Jeff Banks Bet. Betting on horse racing used to be very simple. It was us, the punter, versus them, the bookmakers, the old enemy. But today, betting with online bookmakers is zero fun. Online betting companies promise you the world, but if you have the nerve and the audacity to place a winning bet, they will make you jump through endless hoops just to access your cash. It is not fair and it's not fun. And betting is supposed to be fun. Jeff Banks is different. He's one of the most recognisable faces in British racing. He's got pitches at racecourses all across the United Kingdom. He is a true horse racing fan. And while Jeff very much promotes responsible betting, he is standing up and fighting back against these insane affordability checks. Affordability checks that will destroy the levy and kill British racing. Sign up to jeffbanks.bet right now. Use our promo code FFP500, and not only will you get access to a bookmaker who values your custom, who is a racing fan, but he'll give you best odds guaranteed on British and Irish racing, and he'll give you 10% cash back on net losses after your first month, up to £500. Gamble responsibly, 18 plus only, begambleaware.org. It's tradition refined with modern tech and unbeatable odds. Use our promo code FFP500 and place your bets now with Jeff Banks Bet.
Animal Rising are seen as the arbiters of their cause. They have the ownership to the argument, and we are bound by their rules. It's the same with gambling. If you have a regulated market that is nonsensical and inaccessible, you will go to the black market. That is not my opinion. That is a fact that has happened in Norway. 68% of gambling in Norway happens in the black market because it is so highly regulated. And again, this is the issue that horse racing and gambling industries made, is that they try and take on the discourse. You can't take on the discourse, as you've aptly demonstrated. So what you then have to do is you have to look at the very successful people in politics. Nigel Farage, like him, love him, he is a successful politician. And why is he a successful politician? Because he knows how to get what he wants to talk about on the agenda. And that is the definition of a successful politician in the modern age. Again, whether you like it or not, whether you like him or not, what he wants to talk about gets discussed. And as an industry, both in horse racing and gambling, we do not know how to set our agenda. And that is partly because we don't know who our audience is. We constantly try and put so much emphasis on people who might like to come racing rather than the people who are actually coming racing. Marks and Spencer's made the same mistake in women's clothing. And that's always been the thing that's always been discussed about M&S. People are buying the food, but when it comes to the other side of the business, they're not interested. And when M&S was first set up, it was designed for a lady of a certain age who wanted to look elegant and trendy, not frumpy, but she also didn't want to have her belly button shown when she was 50. There were a few people who were kind of 30s, 40s who were buying from M&S as well because they happened to like the style. And M&S decided, oh, you know what, we're going to be greedy. We want more of that market. So instead of focusing on our loyal customer base, we're going to go for the swing base. We're going to completely ignore the customers that have been loyal to us and who we know purchase from us. And we're going to go for people who may purchase from us. And in the end, it displeased both people because they were trying to create products for two different categories of people with two completely different needs, two completely different economic classes, and it didn't work. And so when they went back to their original core customer base, the profits went up again. And that is in part because we try and appease people who will never come horse racing. And we try and appease young people who are mostly objectionable to horse racing, according to polls that have been done. And young people's opinions are very volatile. So it's a well-known kind of polling trend that young people tend to vote Labour. But when they have to pay taxes and when they have to buy a house and when they have children, they become Conservatives because they realise that Labour have pissed all their money away.
Everybody starts on the left and migrates to the right.
Exactly. And again, another classic mistake made in politics. So when Hague was leader of the opposition, William Hague, we weren't getting anywhere. And we decided that we were going to rebrand for a bit. But it didn't work for a very long time because we tried to appease people who were calling us the nasty party. So we did all these very socially liberal measures that brought us way over to the centre, almost to the centre left. And our core vote base didn't like it because we were trying to appease people who were never going to vote for us. People that call the Tory party the nasty party are never going to vote Conservative. People that think that horse racing is cruel are never going to come horse racing. So that's the first mistake we make. But the second mistake we make is thinking that we can somehow con people into liking horse racing. And that is one of my big bugbears with the music, the obsession with the music, with getting Ollie Murs and whoever else it is down.
Tonight, the Sugababes after the lock-ins.
Yeah, exactly. Until we can get Metallica down, then I'd be interested. But what we're sort of hoping is we can get the Sugababes to Newmarket. And while people are there enjoying the Sugababes, they might kind of fall in love with horse racing at the same time. That's what we're hoping for. But that's not how it happens. So if you had a Metallica concert and you had Taylor Swift opening, you're not going to get a bunch of metalheads going, you know what, she's all right. I'm going to put her on my record player as soon as I get in. That's not how it works. You don't just put something in front of people and they suddenly love it, because that gets people through the gate once, but it doesn't get them coming back again and again. So when you see how popular Ascot is, that's an illusion, because when you see people coming in their hats and their high heels and their suits and their dresses and they're enjoying the racing, that's fantastic. I think that is great that Royal Ascot is so popular. But what that means is Royal Ascot popular, not horse racing, because if you look at the attendance figures in other tracks, it does not match up to Royal Ascot. So what you're producing by adding all this entertainment and pomp and circumstance is one-time horse racing fans who come once a year. You're not creating the authentic, loyal affinity to the sport. And so it's great to innovate and to sort of say, okay, let's try music, but it has to somehow relate to the core sort of soul of the sport. So look at the cinema. The cinemas had a massive problem with streaming and Netflix, because that's now the alternative. Why go to the cinema when I can have it in the comfort of my own home? So cinemas didn't say, right, okay, we need to get more people through the door. So before we show the film, we're going to have a performance of line dancing and see if that gets more people through the door. Well, no. They said, okay, we're going to have comfier seats to improve the cinematic experience. We are going to not just offer sweets and popcorn, we're going to offer a better selection of food so that people can eat there, enhancing the cinema experience. We're going to have screens in 4D, so it's more kind of technological, thus enhancing the cinema experience. All the changes they made improve the cinematic experience for the viewer. They weren't just kind of random bolted on changes here and there. So we have to realise that we can't just con the British public into liking something. We have to give them a reason to like it. And that comes back to trying to appease the unappeasable. So much of our narrative now is, look how fantastic we are at caring for horses, which is great. That is fantastic. I think we should be talking about that. But that shouldn't be our main story. We're not a veterinarian. We want to talk about the sport. Yes, we want people to know that they're cared for. But when you give the impression of a premier world-class sport, the assumption is the athletes are taken care of anyway. The fact that we look after our horses isn't going to draw people to the sport. People aren't going to say, you know what, those horses, they look so happy. Let's go see them being happy at the racetrack. No, they're going to say, we want to go to the horse racing because we want to see Constitution Hill break more records. We want to see City of Troy still to victory. We want to hear sort of real human stories like Kitty's Light. That's what gives people the emotional affinity to the sport. And we get knowing our audience wrong because we're so greedy. We want to have more of the market share rather than an authentic piece of the market share. And it's like Lamborghini. You won't see a Lamborghini advert on TV. Why? Because they openly admit We don't have TV adverts because the people that buy our cars are not sitting around watching TV during the day. And you might think, well, hang on a minute, that's restricting your audience, isn't it? Because what if I'm sitting there watching TV and all of a sudden I think, yeah, I want to buy a Lamborghini. Well, okay, you've lost one customer in me then. But you'll lose many more customers if you don't enhance your market branding where most of your customers are. And they may be at luxury hotels. So for every pound you're spending on TV advertising that isn't capturing your core base, is getting maybe a few swing customers here and there, you're missing out on the core advertising to please your core market, which is where you're getting most of your profits. And it does not make sense the way that we do it. A Michelin star restaurant, you will not find a children's menu in a Michelin star restaurant. And that's because people don't take their children to Michelin star restaurants. And okay, you may say, hang on a minute, you're restricting your customer base because if you've got a family of 5, you're getting rid of 3 of your customers. But they've worked out that people are more likely to spend more money in a restaurant if they don't have their children, because they can spend longer there. They can spend more money on alcohol, which is where most of the profits are made in restaurants. So if you know your audience, you can make money. If we knew our audience, if we really tapped into what our audience wanted, we could make more money. We would then have more prize money, which would then generate more excitement among those who may not like horse racing at the moment. You don't get the enhancement of reputation up by concentrating on the people who may like it. It's the people that do like it that you want to focus on.
This is a paid advertisement from BetterHelp Therapy Online. Have you ever found yourself comparing your life to others? With social media, it's so easy to look at someone's Instagram and think, wow, they've got it all together. But let's be real. Everyone has their struggles, and often what you see online is just a highlight reel. One thing I've learned is that comparison can really steal our joy. Instead of focusing on what others have, therapy can help you center on what you want and how to achieve it. It's all about becoming the best version of yourself. Now, whether or not you've been in therapy, it's important to know that it's not just for those who've gone through major trauma. Therapy can teach you positive coping skills, how to set boundaries, and empower you in your day-to-day life. If you're considering starting therapy, why not give BetterHelp a try? It's entirely online, making it convenient and flexible to fit into your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a registered therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time at no additional charge. With almost 5,000 therapists in the UK, BetterHelp provides access to mental health professionals with a wide range of expertise. Stop comparing and start focusing on what truly matters with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/furlong today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/furlong. This has been a paid advertisement from BetterHelp Therapy Online. There's an obsession with establishment media and ITV, for example. Like, the documentary is going to air when we're recording this evening on Friday tonight. I haven't seen any of it. I can't pass comment on it whatsoever. But one would hope that it will generate real engagement and that it will bring a new audience to the sport and put new eyeballs on the sport. We shall see. But certainly that's the hope for it. I don't think putting it up against... No one watches linear television anymore, to be fair. But for those who do, I don't think putting it up against Gogglebox, one of the biggest shows on British television, is a particularly wise idea. And I want to be optimistic about it. I want to be enthusiastic about it. The only people I see talking about it are racing people. I've Googled it. Where's the reviews? Where's the comments about it in the TV section of the Times? Where's the comments about it in the TV section of the Guardian? It's not there. It's not there. It's being talked about by racing print media, racing publications, but it's not so far branching out of that. And they would have all, I would have hoped, I would like to think, all of those top reviewers, all of those people who can have influence were contacted and said, hey, here's the first few episodes. Can you review our show, please? You would like to think that was done. But in any case, we shall see. I hope it's a huge success because racing needs a boost. But there is a massive decline in people relying on establishment media. People don't believe it anymore. They've been gaslit too much. They've been bullied too much. They've been propagandized too much, and they see through it. They're done with it. Weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. No, there weren't. It's a million people. Over 1 million people were killed in an illegal war. Tens of thousands of British and American servicemen and women who bravely put on the uniform to go and fight for what they thought was a noble cause. Killed, horrifically injured, their lives destroyed, no real support for them when they get back, and only to discover, oh yeah, by the way, there were no weapons of mass destruction. That whole thing was, for whatever reason, to control the oil, fund the military-industrial complex. Beware the military-industrial complex was Eisenhower's famous speech when he stepped aside as president. So I don't think he was a deranged conspiracy theorist. I think he was warning of what he could foresee. And it is absolutely the case. So the media, and that's not the only lies. There's very recent high-profile lies that continue to come out. But only 31% of people polled in the United Kingdom actually trust establishment media. That's awful. Like, that is awful. But that's
because our faith in politicians is at an all-time low.
Yes, but I would challenge that. I would say that your faith in politicians can always be low. And when a charlatan like Boris Johnson emerges on the scene, or someone like Nigel Farage, who, however, he gets elected after all the lies he told about Brexit. And of course, it wasn't the right... if Brexit had been done properly, then it would have been great. But these people lied about how strong Britain would be after Brexit, and I couldn't quite understand that vote. I understand why it happened. It wasn't because people are awful. They voted for it because it wasn't working. Britain was broken for them. The system wasn't working, and the establishment told them vote to stay in Europe, so they chose not to. They did the anti-establishment vote, which was Brexit. So I get that. Trump is the same thing. Trump is not the cause of America's political decline. He's a symptom of it. People voted for hope and change, and they didn't get it. And they weren't going to vote for two establishment figures. The figures that were being presented to them were, which political dynasty do you want? Do you want Hillary Clinton or do you want Jeb Bush? Because these are your options, peasants. And Trump came along and blew that whole thing up. And he's a narcissist. If you watched his speech last night, Jesus, it's starts pretty strong and then just descends into this utter madness. This complete lunacy, total rhetoric.
Yes, but I call Comcast Commicast because it's just run completely by communists. But
MSNBC weren't even there. They had a LED backdrop pretending they were there when they weren't. Joy Behar, their top political commentator, she said,
you can trace it. You can trace it back to the political.
Sorry, I have to say, she said that, Joe Biden's just got COVID, and if Joe Biden recovers from COVID, that used to kill elderly people. If he recovers from COVID, that's just as impressive as Donald Trump getting up after being shot.
100%.
So it's crazy, but you can have politics. You can have politicians who lie. Politicians are always going to lie. They're self-centered. They're out for themselves. That's the way they are. But you're supposed to have Jeremy Paxman or Jon Snow, who's there going, no, you are lying. And I'm going to hold you on that. Was it Heseltine? Was it? It wasn't Heseltine. It was, God, who was it? It's this endless, did you threaten to overrule him? Over and over and over again on Newsnight. It was an incredible piece of journalism. He would not relent. Now the standard of journalism is Emily Maitlis standing in front of Nigel Farage in America going like, why are you here?
Yeah.
Like, why are you not in your constituency? Like, that's not, that's not great politics. Or Kay Burley with a gotcha. It's like, no. All of that has just fallen apart. And it's fallen apart on Commicast, if you want to call it that. I hadn't heard of that before. Which is Sky. Rupert Murdoch does not own Sky anymore. Comcast do. They own MSNBC, which is Microsoft NBC, for those who want to know. But the reason that 31% of people in Great Britain, which I think is probably conservatively high, actually, it's only 31% of the population that trust media, is because they've been lied to so much. And that doesn't just apply to political discourse. It applies to everything. Unless you're listening to sport and the opinions of what someone has to say about Gareth Southgate's leadership of England, or who should be the new Man United manager after Eric Ten Hag's bumbling management of that club, or how is the new Liverpool manager going to do? That stuff can be obviously biased. Everyone knows that the people who are on there have their own teams and their own agendas as to why they're pushing certain narratives. But it's football. It's sport. It's a bit of fun. We can talk about it and have we're trying to escape the horrors of politics in that way. So that's all right. You can trust that. But if you lose trust, which clearly a lot of people have in establishment media, and you no longer believe what you're being told, you don't believe your politicians, you don't believe the media, why do you think people are going to continue to watch establishment television in the first place? Why do we, in British racing and Irish racing, why do we feel like we have to continue to tread on tippy toes around people who are lying about gambling statistics, lying about the treatment of horses? And don't get me wrong, there are some major issues that this sport has to confront and do better. We can all do better. But we could also do what Josh Abbie was suggesting on this podcast back in January. Embrace the freedom of social media. Embrace the freedom of digital content creation. YouTube is there. You can create your own content. You can do your own thing. And if you produce it well enough, you don't need ITV to air your show on Friday nights at 9 p.m. By the way, I genuinely don't see, and I don't want this to come across as like I'm having a bash at ITV, because we don't want another Ed Chamberlain rant on the Sporting Life podcast. But what I would say is, like, if you're going to criticize something, you're criticizing it from a place of decency. You're criticizing it from a place of concern. You're not doing it for any reason other than, look, this is a huge opportunity, right? We need to be able to sell the sport in the best possible way that we can. And we need to be able to understand that that means we don't actually need legacy media in the way that we did. Because there's TikTok, there's YouTube, there's social media, there's X, there's massive user base. Who do you think is more mainstream media, Joe Rogan or Sky News? Because I can pretty much tell you, I know what Joe Rogan's listenership is, right? So we can embrace that if we produce it well. And then we can present our own narrative and trust our sport and trust the audience to be smart enough to go, hey, I like this, I want to be part of it. We're the second most attended sport in the UK. We're the fifth most watched sport in the UK. That doesn't just apply to ITV, that applies to Sky and to Racing TV. We can do really well. We just need to have a backbone and a bit of bravery and a bit of confidence in our own ability for our sport and believe in it properly.
No, 100%. I think there are two main points to take from that. Social media is a huge vehicle. The engagement on social media is absolutely massive. There was a recent poll that said more young people get their news from TikTok than anywhere else. And that,
why do you think they want to ban it?
Yeah, so quickly. But again, know your audience. Sports people love information. We live in an information-centric age. So get the digital graphics out. Make personalities of the jockeys. If you don't like football, you could name someone in the England team. If you don't like horse racing, you won't be able to name a jockey. And that is the problem. People have an affinity to players and teams. They have a loyalty to them. People get tattoos of their football teams on their bodies. I mean, that is huge. That shows a sheer loyalty to the sport. Those are the kinds of fans that we want, because those people bring their children. That's the next generation of horse racing fans. The people that come up from the grassroots and they fall in love with the sport from an early age, not the people you try and con in with Sugababes. So that is a really important point, is that we have to look at other sports and think, what do they do so well? They engage people with what they love about the sport. So when you look at the headlines, Kane's heartbreak, Hey Jude, they were about the people that are the lifeblood of the sport. We do not make enough of that. Where is that? I mean, I don't think that the jockeys should be walking around in the parade like a bunch of lemons, but they're nowhere. They're nowhere on the race show. The first time you see them is when they leap up onto their horses. And that isn't right. They go and talk in the winners' enclosure where the crowd are not, when they're all in their seats. Otherwise, you're back and forth and up and down like a horse draws, going from the parade to the food. That most people don't do that unless you are a diehard racing fan. You need to get these people in front of the thousands of eyes that you have. And we just don't do enough of it. We should be making more of our assets. But then the second thing that you were talking about with the media is that I do think that a lot of that is based and seeded in politics, because these aren't overt lies that are being told. These come from the establishment and the kind of civil service, nanny statism kind of plague that's overrun so much of governance, because in public health, the lifeblood of public health, the oxygen for it is hysteria. So if things get better, you suddenly have no need for all these expensive grants and all this research anymore. So there was a point where actually children were becoming less obese. And public health said, oh, we can't have that because the money's going to dry up. No. We need to find a new way of making children fat. So what did they do? Is they reduced the thresholds for what it means to be clinically obese. And that is done time and time and again in public health. Is that the scales, so in gambling, we turned our backs on the gold standard NHS survey, and we opted to base statistics on surveys that were methodologically flawed because it made the problem sound worse. And that is always the goal of public health. Make the problem sound far worse than it is, because otherwise your time is done. So the Gamblers Consumer Forum, we did a FOI request to the Gambling Commission, and we found that there have been emails from the Gambling Commission to notable academics in the field for when a positive gambling narrative is produced to rebut it. That is supposed to be the consumer representative who's supposed to uphold the basic principles of public life and is supposed to adhere to the growth duty, which is to ensure that all your decisions have a positive economic impact on your industry. They are supposed to adhere to all sorts of rules and regulations about how they conduct consultations. They only just released 2021 consultation that showed that 80% of respondents are against affordability checks. So the narrative has been decided. The narrative has been decided that gambling is bad. It's a cardinal sin. The way that you combat that is not by saying no to affordability checks. The way you combat it is to say affordability checks. They don't care about the damage to the horse racing industry. They could not care less. Ministers do not care about the damage to the horse racing industry. They say they care because they have to be polite, but they don't, because if they did, they wouldn't be discussing it in the first place. What they care about is to be seen to be doing something about gambling harm. So you have to give them something in return that will allow them to do that. So instead, what you say is, look, affordability checks will not work because you cannot characterize addiction by loss. This is evidenced in other addictions and in many, many academic journals, articles. I mean, there's even a what I would characterize as an anti-gambling figure, Matt Gaskell. He openly admits you cannot characterize addiction by loss. So to talk about money is completely flawed. So we should be saying, look, if you want to help people who are harmed by gambling, look at their behavior. That is scientifically backed. People who are addicted present with addictive behaviors. They always have done, because it's a clinical cognitive condition. You cannot treat it as affordability checks do, like it's a social condition you catch at a casino. So you have to argue what it is they want to argue about. We do not do that. Again, we do not know our audience. If you have got a politician who is focused on gambling harm, talking to them about horse racing and the damage it will do to horse racing will fall on deaf ears. Because most politicians are one-dimensional, particularly politicians that have been in opposition. So when you're in opposition for a very long time, most of your policies, most of your decisions, most of what you say has very little consequence because none of it is ever acted on. So at the moment, Labour are going to be saying and doing things that are one-dimensional, that will not work, that only focus on a very narrow issue because they have no experience of their policies actually coming to fruition. So we could bark on about them, about horse racing for as long as they like, but they are tunnel visioned about gambling harm. We have to talk about it in reference to gambling harm. The Gamblers Consumer Forum recently met with a company that uses AI to identify the very few genuine addicts there are in the gambling market. And then it actually recommends what treatment it would give to them based on the way that they behave. If you have that, why on earth would you need affordability checks? I mean, that is a fantastic solution. Affordability checks are a substitute to that solution. But if no one's making that argument, if we're just banging the drum saying, no affordability checks, look what it will do to horse racing, no one is going to listen.
You said a lot that I found really fascinating there. The beginning of it, though, I thought was almost the most standout, is less Sugababes, more City of Troy. We want more of the equine stars as opposed to... Sugababes are great. It's fantastic. Siobhan Donaghy's back in the group. That's brilliant. You can have them play afterwards if you want. Put on your Ollie Moore's concert if you want. But maybe take the French approach. The French Paris Longchamp approach is they'll have a DJ playing at the Grand Prix de Paris. And if the audience want to come see that famous DJ, that's great. But they pay top dollar for those tickets. You reduce the ticket price, and it's the cheapest ticket price when you go in the door. Right? So when you go in the gate very early on, before the first race, that's the cheapest price of the ticket. And that price increases throughout the day the later it gets. And then if you can turn those young people into horse racing fans, fantastic. If they just wander around the place and they're buying drinks and contributing to the economy of the racetrack, that's great too. But maybe they'll get obsessed with what's happening on the track. But you can attract those fans to see Calvin Harris's DJ set or David Guetta or whatever. But you can try to really, you can still have your concert and have Tiny Tempa playing and make money from doing that. That's great. But you pay top tier pricing for Tiny Tempa if you're coming in at $5.50 when the last race is $5.30 at Sandown. Great. But if you come in to go see the Tiny Tempa gig at 2:00 and the first race is 2:30, you get your ticket at a reduced rate. I think that's hopefully a way that would help to turn things around. Although I have to say the Curragh attendance figures are bloody awful. And I was doing some research on comparing the French Derby, because the French Derby seems to be, well, it's just a better quality of race, quite frankly, since they reduced it to 10 furlongs. And if you'd said reducing the Irish Derby to 10 furlongs 10 years ago would be a good idea, you'd have been laughed at. Now it's whether the European pattern would actually allow it is another matter entirely. But they get around about the same amount of people in Chantilly as they do at the Curragh. So things are probably better in French racing to a certain extent, in that there's more money there for sure. But it doesn't mean that everything is working perfectly. It's not. But we can all learn from one another.
Exactly. We can all learn from one another. I think that the industry is obviously on the decline. And what we generally do when we elect new leadership, which will be happening very soon for a number of kind of key positions in horse racing, is we always look internal. We always look at people who have experience in sport. And that I can understand the logic behind that. But what about getting people in from other industries, particularly those that have transformed themselves? Because we need to get back up to our former glory. And we need someone who knows how to do that. And I read a fantastic book by Rory Sutherland. He was talking about trains. And he was saying that you've got two categories of people who use the train. You've got the people who are the regular commuters. They're on the train every day, same time. They want a seat because they think, I'm paying a lot of money for this. And I use it every day. I want to sit down. I want to work. Why should I pay all this money if I'm not getting a seat? And then you get people who use the train infrequently. They're not so bothered if they don't get a seat because they're only paying for it once and they've got nothing else to do. They haven't got any work to do. They're just on the train for whatever reason. Those are two different people with two different needs. And so what he suggested is, rather than coming up with innovations that will please everybody, come up with innovations that will please the people most in need. The people most in need of a better train are the people that use the trains more. So he said, if you have a season ticket, you should be able to use first class if all the other seats are full. And that doesn't impact on the profits of the train companies because first class is sitting empty anyway. So it's not like you're losing money by allowing other people to go into first class, but you're helping the people that need it most. And the people that aren't using it the most, they're not really that affected because their expectations are lower because they're using the product more infrequently. With racing, we don't really do much for our loyal fans. We talk about reducing ticket prices. We don't want to reduce ticket prices for everybody. Why would we want to reduce the ticket prices for the very wealthy people that come from West London to watch Royal Ascot? No, darling, they have plenty of money. We want their money. But why aren't we reducing ticket prices for our loyal fans? Because the people that love horse racing the most will be impacted by that, and you're pleasing your core support. And not only that, is that these people will continue to come horse racing. You're not going to lose money from them because they're already there. They're already at the tracks.
It sounds to me like what you're advocating for is something like Josh Epiafi's Racing for Rewards, but that overall what you would do is you would value the loyal fan base of British and Irish racing and value them by rewarding them for their continued support. So like Mike, Mike Parcell, who's doing the grand tour of all of the British and Irish racecourses and did a great feature on Race Day TV with Frankie Foster the other day, which people seem to love, and rightly so. He's a great character. He's a lovely person and a real enthusiastic voice in racing. We need more people like Mike, a lot more people like him. Wouldn't it be great if you were reducing the ticket price for him because he's such a loyal racegoer? That kind of thing is what you're suggesting?
Because it makes economic sense. So, for example, look, we can't reduce all the ticket prices because we have a big black hole in horse racing finances. So to say, slash all the ticket prices, that's no good. That's not going to do it for us. But if you've got, say, for example, you've got a ticket that's £150 and you've got a ticket that's £30. If you're able to pay £150 for a horse racing ticket, you could afford £30 more to make it 180. If you're only paying £30 more is double the price. That is significant. So don't slash the ticket prices across the board. Don't increase the ticket prices across the board. Know your audience. Work out the people who could afford to pay more and then charge them more. If you're spending £200 on a ticket to the Queen Elizabeth stand at Epsom, you can afford 50 quid more. Guarantee it. If you're buying one for the paddock, you cannot afford £50 more because you've only spent £20 on the ticket in the first place. And so it's about a bit like we were saying with the media. There's no nuance anymore. It's right. This is the decision. Increase the prices or decrease the prices. There's no in between. But in every other industry, there is an understanding of the characteristics of our customers relate to our business decisions. Know your audience, please.
Yeah, I don't know, Abbie. Why do you hate single mothers? I don't know, Abbie. I think that's too much common sense. It's too much common sense, Abbie. And if you know anything about British and Irish racing, it's that common sense is not that common. I think your proposal is just a little bit too radical.
Exactly. I mean, a madman.
Reducing price for regular race goers?
That surely must be racist in the Guardian at some stage.
Yeah, why are you such a xenophobe?
Exactly. But look at the racing league. Fantastic idea. I love innovation.
A great idea.
I'm not going to bash the racing league conceptually. Execution is terrible.
Horrible.
And I'll tell you why. When someone says to you, where do you live? Someone says to me, where do you live? I'd say, I live in Canterbury. I don't say, I live in the southeast. People do not have an affinity to their region. When you're abroad and someone says, oh, where do you live? You say, oh, I'm from the UK. You don't say, I live in the Western Hemisphere.
It's funny because
it's a misunderstanding of what people want. Horse racing is not a team sport, but you certainly could turn it into one if you wanted to. A bit like golf used to be something that old retired men did in the afternoon. Now, golf is in the Olympics. It's athletic. You can change the perception of the sport if you want to. You could do it by trainer. So people got an affinity to the trainer and they were wearing trainers' colours. I don't see any merchandise in the racing league.
Oh, there's merchandise, but no one's buying it.
Well, yeah, because people don't have an affinity to the region in which they live. There's no impetus to say, I'm going to support these people. Whereas if you're a Willie Mullins fan, if you're an Aidan O'Brien fan, then suddenly, yeah, you do have a reason to go down and support those horses. You do have a reason to pop on the Aidan O'Brien cap. I mean, there really is no excuse. It's like Formula One. Formula One is not a team sport, except that when you go to Formula One, what have people got on their caps? Ferrari, Mercedes. So actually, just because it's an individual driver at the wheel, it doesn't mean you can't turn it into a team sport. But the teams are not based on where they're manufactured, are they? They're based on the actual manufacturers. And again, it's a great idea, but we don't accept that we've got it wrong. We get too dogmatic about it. And we should be looking at alternatives. Okay, the racing league is a great idea in principle. It's not working. How do we change it so that it does work? How do we change it so it works for the fans? Stop worrying about attracting new people in. Focus on the people you've got, and the people will come by themselves.
Well, the first year of the racing league was like Team Talksport, for example. It was a corporate sponsored event, and a lot of people didn't like that. They really didn't like it. There's a real mixed bag when you talk to trainers about it, because vast majority of trainers love the racing league, but they love it for a very specific reason. Moderate racehorses are able to race for prize money that they just would not be capable of winning in any other event. The prize money is a really good thing. It's a great incentive. Jockeys get appearance fee money. They do not get appearance fee money for any other event they do in the UK. For that matter, in Europe, you might get appearance fee money for the Dubai World Cup. You might get it for Saudi Arabia. How many of them get invited out there? That's another matter. So, yeah, the incentive for jockeys is great. But the only people who are truly excited about it, the only people who are truly on social media and hyping it up and saying they can't wait for the racing league to be back, are the people who are paid to tell you how great it is. And that's a problem. That's a big, big problem. You can have that for a year. You can have that for 2 years. But if you're into the 4th year of your project and the only people who are excited about it are the people who are the shills being paid to tell you how great it is, then I'm sorry, but it's a failure. And last year was supposed to be the year that was going to turn it around. And we looked up, we did some research. We actually did some work, Abbie. We looked up what was the average attendance for Yarmouth Racecourse. It's 2,500 people. They got 2,500 people for the racing league. Ross Millar was telling me that Chepstow had a 70s themed disco for as part of a race night. They got more people at the 70s themed disco than they did for the racing league. And then team managers were going out on social media saying, don't worry about it. Don't worry about that. They were the wrong tracks. They were the wrong tracks. These are the right tracks. We're going to Windsor. Windsor's going to turn it around. Now you're going to see a huge crowd. They gave away tickets for free, and they didn't tell you how many people turned up because no one did. Because no one cares. It's not resonating with fans. And the main reason it's not resonating with fans is because you are running moderate racehorses. I'm sorry. You don't care about that class of racehorse. If you're a hardcore racing fan and you're going racing like Mike is on a weekly basis or every single day even, and you go to the all-weather tracks, that's great, but that's the standard of horse you're seeing. You're not seeing City of Troy or even a group, a Diego Velasquez. None of those horses are turning up and none of the big trainers are involved in it because they don't have any interest in it. It's not for them. And so I'm sorry, it's not working. And there is a way it could have worked, I think, if they had included Ireland, as in not just Team Ireland where George Bowie has to become an Irish trainer wearing the green, white and gold. Okay, yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. George O. Bowie, that famous Carlo man. No, you could have actually involved Irish tracks. Leopardstown as a vibrant Thursday night fixture. Diego Velasquez won there the other night. I know that there's
because the Irish Grand National.
Yeah, but you could take Leopardstown Thursday night. All right, Leopardstown is a Dublin track. You have access to It's very easy for people to fly over from the UK to get to Leopardstown. Look at the success of the Dublin Racing Festival. So you could split this between ARC and RMG. They come together for international rights. They come together for things when it's commercially viable and in their interest commercially. Doesn't seem like they're able to come together, though, to work together to make the sport beneficial for everybody. I don't know. Look, that's above my pay grade, I guess. But you could involve Leopardstown, and Leopardstown's going to host one of the nights, and so Team Ireland actually has a racetrack that's part of it. And perhaps if Sky's failed attempt to get 5 of the Irish tracks to break away from the other tracks and leave racing TV, maybe one of those tracks would have formed part of the racing league. Maybe they would have, but that didn't happen. All the tracks stayed with racing TV. They all went with RMG in the end. And there's no olive branch to RMG and say, look, how about we share the racing league coverage? How about we get Leopardstown or we get Dundalk and we make racing league there? Go to Ascot. They'll almost certainly say no because they'd be afraid it would damage the integrity of the Sugar Cup or take the shine off of that. But you can go to Sandown or you can go to Newbury. You can go to a big London track, like go to Kempton. Try and make something of that. What are you doing with that track anyway? You can try and go to the bigger tracks that attract bigger crowds. But there's no attempt to do that because ARC don't have any interest in really doing that. And the Racing League are happy with ARC. So it's never going to go anywhere. And as from what I understand, from what I gather, turnover isn't great on it. No one's watching it. Viewing figures, you can't hide the viewing figures on ITV. The only reason that ITV are doing it is because William Hill are sponsoring it and they're getting paid to broadcast it. But they get buried on ITV4. It's getting beaten by reruns of Minder, whatever. Sky Sports Racing literally had a conversation with an Irish racecourse executive who said, why would we leave RMG, Sky are throwing all their support behind the racing league? No one's watching it. That proves Sky Sports Racing not as great as they think they are. Or maybe it's just that Sky Sports Racing actually is a great channel and they've got some really powerful tracks now, but no one's resonating with the racing league itself. Yeah. And so it's a failed and broken product. And the only people who are telling you how great it is are those who are being paid to tell you how great it is.
I remember when I think it was 2022 or 23, the CEO of the Jockey Club, Nevin Truesdale, he posted on LinkedIn that Cheltenham was the Olympics of jump racing. And I thought, how amazing is that? What an incredible slogan. The Olympics of jump racing. That
he didn't coin that phrase, but yeah, fair enough.
Want of the sport. I mean, that's the first time that I'd heard it. And I thought, wow, I like that a lot. That is the perception that you want. And I'm going to leave you with my favourite anecdote. It's my Red Bull anecdote. So there was a group of guys that said, right, we're going to make a rival to Coke. And they came up with this concoction and they gave it to a focus group. And they said, well, one participant said, I wouldn't drink this piss if you paid me. They created a product that was abjectly disgusting.
What the hell is even that?
It was in smaller cans and it was more expensive than Coke. And it is now the second biggest rival to Coke. So hang on a minute. You have a product that tastes disgusting, that is not value for money and costs more. But why does it sell? Because Red Bull says this will give you wings. And when you drink it, it does indeed give you wings. So if you deliver on what you promise, you will get the fans. If you say we're going to offer you world-class sport and you offer world-class sport, the fans will come. They will buy your Red Bull because you gave them wings. If you promise a racing league that is thrilling, exhilarating, the epitome of this world-class sport, and you do it in Yarmouth with with horses that no one's heard of, I mean, that's not giving you wings, is it? And again,
all due respect to you.
This is the second part of my favourite advert, which I absolutely love, which shows the strength of a good message and delivering on that message. is that they then gave people cocktails. One was labelled a Red Bull cocktail, one was labelled a vodka cocktail, and one was labelled a fruit cocktail. They had to drink the cocktails and they said, which one makes you more intoxicated? They all said not all of them, I think like 80%, said the Red Bull cocktail. They thought it was more potent and it made them more intoxicated. All the cocktails were the same. So just by saying it and delivering on it, people think it, even if they don't necessarily enjoy it. But you can't give people an expectation and then not deliver on it. You can't promise people world-class sport if you're not going to give them the graphics, if you're not going to give them the personalities of the jockeys. You can't say that it's a sport for everybody when you go to a racetrack for the first time or you bring someone along and there's no information. I open up a race card. Okay, I know what the going is, but I don't know why the going's important. When I sat with my friend, I took her to Cheltenham for her 40th. And I said, well, I talked to her about the going. I said, yeah, but Cheltenham's got a high water table, so you've got to remember the trampoline effect when the horses jump the hurdles. She looked at me like I just handed her a dead puppy. She was like, what are you talking about? Whereas if you talked to her about football and said, oh, the goalkeeper, she would go, who's the goalkeeper? You have to accept that there isn't a mass knowledge of horse racing, and that if you want people to get into the sport, you have to educate them first, right? That's what we did with American football. So more people watch American football or Super Bowl in the UK now more than ever, because they came over and they created American football teams locally. There's one in Essex, there's one in Kent, and in all the home counties, I think. And that's how you do it. You teach people about the sport. Again, you can't fatten the pig on market day. You can't expect people to show up at the race course with a race card that doesn't really give them much information about the choice they're making, which is part of their enjoyment experience. And then for them to go, oh, I'm a fan. And that, again, shows the disconnect that horse racing has between horse racing and gambling. The BHA, from my conversations with them, seem to want to believe that gambling isn't an intrinsic part of horse racing. It is. God. It's a massive part.
Well, then why do they want to refund? Why do they want to fix the levy funding then? If it's not such an intrinsic part of the sport, why do you need to reform the levy?
I spoke to somebody at the BHA, and we were having a conversation about the white paper and about affordability checks, and they didn't know what a harm marker was, and that is, for me, a huge concern. And it sort of shows the disconnect that horse racing has between. We'd much rather have that kind of internal arguments than we would actually focus on the reality that's going on outside. And we have to get people betting on the race course. And all of these conversations about let's have a centralised system like they do in Hong Kong, let's have a tote. You can't compare those two things, horse racing in the UK and horse racing in Hong Kong, because for a start, in Hong Kong and in China, you can only bet on the horse racing in the lottery. You can't bet on anything else. So it's a kind of it gives the illusion that there's so much money in horse racing. That's because there's no choice. It's a kind of false premierization, if you will, if we're allowed to say that word.
Oh well, another absolute.
So
again, a little bit like the racing league. I'm not against innovation. I'm not against change. Adapt or die. You have to adapt in order to move forward, but do it right. Do it well.
I think premierization needs a bit more time to see if it can work, because these things, they don't happen overnight. But like you say, innovation good, but do it well and be bold about it, for goodness sake. I mean, it's like Barry Hearn when he came in and he changed snooker and he changed darts, and that doesn't mean get rid of everything, because you do have to. There's always going to be a tension between authenticity and traditionalism and modernisation of the sport. So you didn't say get rid of everything, change the colour of the bloody snooker table, and they'll just stop all trying to do that, obviously. They still wear their nice suits. They still keep the basic integrity of the sport. But they did a league that interested people. They took bold and decisive action, and we don't do that. The infrastructure of our sport is not set up to do that, because the veto powers of all these committees is like a chokehold on the sport. You need someone to come in to say, look, this is not working. Let's not pretend that it's not working. The racing league isn't working. The way that the internal structures are organised isn't working. Prize money is down. Betting turnover is down. You need someone to say, look, what we're doing now, no, it's not working. We need something different. Whereas every time you open up the racing post, there's a leader of somewhere in horse racing saying, we're doing really well. We're doing great.
Yeah, gaslighting and propaganda.
Yeah.
Oh, don't worry, it's all great. It's fantastic. Are we uploading this tonight? We are? Okay. So tomorrow, there are 2 premier race meetings, Market Race and then Newbury. Newmarket's meeting that was on during this time window, the premier race window, but the Jockey Club handed back a number of premier race day fixtures because they're like, this is not working. That meeting has been moved to a 4:20 start and a 7:05 finish. We'll see what that means for the attendance. Why are Cartmel and Ripon off at 140 and 140 to 5:10 for Cartmel, Ripon 2:10 to 5:05? They're not premier race fixtures. How did they get to be in the premier race window when they're not stumping up the cash that Market Race and Newbury have to?
Well, it's like when you have racing at Windsor and Ascot on the same day. I mean,
genius.
But yeah, I mean, I'm going to go really free market radical here. Forget the bloody race planning. Let the race courses decide for themselves. That is how every other. And let them decide for themselves. That is how every other private business works, because it works by supply and demand. If people want to go there on that day, they will show up. If they don't, they won't. And then the racecourse can cut it, and they could let racecourses do their own premierisation. We're too kind of held to ransom by media rights. Change it. If you don't like the way the table's set, turn the table over. That is how every other private enterprise works, is that you go by the customer's demand and you give the supply. You don't decide the supply and expect the customer's demands to meet. That's insane.
Yeah.
No one else works like that.
That's just insane enough that it actually might work, but I'm not sure if I trust.
Yeah, maybe it's too insane for horse racing.
I'm not sure if I trust some of the entities that would be involved in that. On a bombshell ending to the show, you mentioned AI earlier on, and the obvious innovation of AI. I was having a meeting with some people in broadcasting in Ireland, and the conversation came on to AI actually, and they can't quite do it yet, but they are very much aware of the fact that they will be downsizing their production teams, and the overall landscape of Irish radio will change, and AI will be a big part of that, because you're going to be in a position where you can tell the AI, here's a commercial that we want made. This is the commercial that you made for us previously. Do a song similar to it that's original, have an upbeat voice that's similar to the same voiceover, but here's your script, and make 5 different versions of it. And then you'll give it to the client. The client will approve which one they want. The client will probably be an AI for the company, and it will be just AIs talking to one another. But you're not going to need a production engineer anymore. You're not going to need... You will still need people to do the physical labor. You'll need a sound engineer. You will need... You'll need a newsreader. You'll need a presenter, because people still want the personality and the live atmosphere of that. But researchers and producers, I don't know about that, but researchers and producers, just a hybrid of Siri and ChatGPT. That's what it will be, or Gronk, the X platform. You'll just be able to ask your AI, hey, what's the population of London? You don't need a researcher for that anymore. So a lot of the landscape is going to dramatically change. But as we're talking about, changing the power grid to greener emissions and all of us doing better. The United States military are the biggest polluters on the entire planet. They have 750 military bases around the world. The greatest man-made environmental disaster is the destruction of the Nord Stream gas pipeline. The award-winning journalist Seymour Hersh, widely credited with being responsible for ending the Vietnam War, for exposing horrendous war crimes committed by the American military, and that just ended all support for the American military and that war. A widely credited, widely respected journalist, he broke the story that the Nord Stream gas pipeline was blown up by the United States Navy SEALs in conjunction with the Norwegian Special Forces. And it shouldn't be any surprise to anybody, because Joe Biden had said exactly that. He intimated that if Russia invaded Ukraine, they would put an end to Nord Stream. And a journalist said, hang on a second, you don't have any jurisdiction over that. That's between Germany and Russia. You can't interfere with that. We will put an end to it, before his complete senility totally took hold. Now there's some stooge of Zelensky's has taken the fall for it in Ukraine, and they're making out that this guy was the mastermind and it was the Ukrainian military who did deep sea diving to plant the depth charges to blow it up. That is the single greatest environmental disaster and pollution in history. The United Nations wanted to investigate it, and the United States, surprise, surprise, vetoed that investigation. So if we're really concerned about climate change, then why did the Americans blow up Nord Stream? Why is the US military the greatest polluter in the world? Why is no one protesting them? Aside from a few of the Just Stop Oil folks, to be fair, they have outside the United States military. But nobody in media ever talks about it. Nobody ever mentions it. There's no pressure put on them. So whatever about climate change, right? I don't doubt it's real, but their solutions for it are not. These are not the things that are going to fix it. You are not being told. You're cutting out your use of deodorant, you recycling, you changing your ways. It's not going to do anything. Not really. Not in the face of things. But AI, how much of a percentage of the Irish energy consumption do you think is used by AI and data centers?
Oh, very small amount, I would imagine.
I would guess.
Oh, I don't know. Oh, no, I don't want to guess my way out. Tell me.
18%. Our power grid's already overstretched and overburdened.
I was going to say 20. So close.
18% of the Irish power grid is currently used by data centers and AI. It is predicted to go to 27% by as near enough as 2029. So think of it this way. For every 60 American people, one data center or one AI app actually would use the equivalent of 60 people. So we're going to completely overburden our energy grid because AI is here. It's not going anywhere. No one's going to turn it off. It's only going to become more powerful, and we're all going to become more reliant on it. Well, how is that going to work if we're waiting for the wind to be blowing for the wind turbines, or is it a sunny day for the solar panels? Like, you can't just turn off fossil fuels. Never mind what the head of Greenpeace said, or the founder of Greenpeace, that 50% of the global population will die if we achieve net zero. So, yeah, it's
a crazy world in which we live, and horse racing is being attacked, gambling is being attacked, but we have to be creative in finding ways to combat that, and doing the same thing over and over again and hoping it will work. That is not going to work. Einstein said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and hoping you would end up with a different result. We need to try new things, but most importantly, we need to admit when it's not working. Cricket, they've done loads of innovations. Most of them didn't work, but that's okay, because if you try 5 different things, chances are one of them will work. Bad ideas will always be trumped by good ideas. But if you keep on that one idea and convince yourself it's working, and people say, no, it's not. Not only are you doing something that's not working, you are alienating your core fan base who are saying it's not working, and you just wind them up. That is not how you what defines sport. The one thing that defines sport is loyalty. That is sport. Loyalty to whatever it is that you're supporting. And then you extend that by loyalty to a team, to a club, to an individual, whatever it is. Loyalty. And that's what we should be focusing on, not transitory people coming through the door. We get it wrong when we do that. And there are so many, the business world is littered with examples of when companies try and do that, when they try and be trendy, they try and change their target market. We've got a great target market. We've got a sport the king watches. The king watches our sport. We have the royal family there all the time. And look, the royal family are criticised routinely all the time. It doesn't mean that we'll be exempt from criticism by doing that. We'll always be criticised. But you have to focus on what the right battles of fighting. Trying to go on Sky News and trying to convince crazy lefties who want the sport gone, and who spend most of their time reading The Guardian, believing that people are dropping dead outside of Ladbrokes because of gambling. They're not watching horse racing anyway.
Why are you a misogynist, Abbie?
Oh, I don't know.
Right, that's it. On that bombshell from Abbie MacGregor, I really enjoyed the conversation with Abbie, and please God, we'll do it again next week. We're previewing Glorious Goodwood and the King George for you next week as well, so hopefully you can join us for that, and lots more content coming your way very, very soon, please God. It's only possible with you liking this episode on YouTube. Presumably it's on YouTube. If it is, great. If not, apologies. Or sharing it on social media as well. And hey, if you didn't agree with everything that we said, that's okay. It's all right to disagree with one another. Just do it in a respectful way. There's nothing wrong with that. That's one of the things that just seems to have overtaken the world lately. Nobody can have an opinion that steps outside the norm. Oh my goodness! Different opinions are vital, and conversation is vital. So I hope you found this insightful. Yeah, question everything. You should question everything. All right, we'll talk to you again soon. Look after yourself and each other. God bless. The Final Furlong Podcast is proudly brought to you by Jeff Banks Bet. Join the excitement and sign up to Jeff Banks online now to get 10% off any net losses returned as cash after your first month of betting up to £500 at jeffbanks.bet.